Okay, just gonna start this here at the entry screen. Interesting Halo news, a new level just got released for the original game, kind of. This is a kind of reconstruction of a very early working build of what the game could have been from inside some very old Bungie files, and I'll explain the significance of that as we kind of get started. I'll just let the thing speak for itself for a moment here. As you can see, looks like Halo, but where are we? What is Deca Millennium? Apparently that was something within Bungie at some point. If you've seen the very, very early alpha footage, if you're a big fan, we're looking at that. Some guys within 343, gee, they can't make a good original Halo game to save their lives, but it was very good of them to dig through the old Bungie stuff and put this together as a curiosity for those of us who care. And if you're familiar with the rest of my channel, you probably shouldn't be, it's for me and a few dozen friends. It's just, I'm very interested in the history of Bungie. There's guys who just make a lot of really interesting stuff. I think they had very interesting ideas in relation to just what video games could be back in the day, and I'm very excited to have this out. A lot of fairly elaborate voice acting in what's basically a test build of the game, but here we go. That was unfortunate for those guys.
We got caught out by those banshees.
One moment.
We lost Lato, and Oscar squad got totally wiped. Bad. We got a good look at the island, though.
There we go.
Covenant patrols everywhere.
Alright, sorry, I just wanted to get that done for the sake of people watching who wanted to kind of get everything they're not so interested in me.
You good?
There we have subtitles on, so if I'm going on, you can still tell what's going on.
No! Damn it! Wake up, man! Alright, look! We need to take ammo, scrape out the Pelican. Who has the flares? McLeese had it, man, but he bit it. Chief, you'll want this. It's the data we scraped from our mission on the island.
Sorry, I'm just letting the Marines talk there. That's extremely interesting to me. This scene is very stock, the voice acting, but the staging and drama are more elaborate than what we get in the finished Halo, and yet the staging of this scene and the drama are very elaborate. You can hear from kind of the way people are speaking, there's a lot more of that James Cameron's Aliens influence here, and this is just, again, this is very interesting to see what Bungie had on their minds when it was very early days in getting this game created. We can just see this scene here. It's very reminiscent of kind of Far Cry 1, this idea of, okay, what's going to make a game cool and feel like it's from the future? The idea Bungie had wasn't to, you know, make shooting more complex. The idea they had was more space and more physicality. If you don't watch my other videos, that's generally the big fascination of mine, talking about Halo as this game which was very elaborately constructed as a kind of very physical, very kinetic, very big and reactive world. It's kind of got the Breath of the Wild almost like thing going on where, yeah, everything about Bungie's games, it's very much about the satisfaction that comes from viscerality and tactile touch and so on, and I think that just looking at this, it pleases me to no end. It vindicates all of my suspicions about what Halo was meant to be and what makes it cool, and I definitely think that Bungie were thinking like me, and of course you can see that this is much bigger than anything that made it into the final game, but of course compromises had to be made in fitting this thing on an Xbox and making it run smoothly. Would this even have behaved if it were a PC game of the time? I'm inclined to doubt that. You may have seen that message saying that this was all over the Steam page for this, well, they've released it as a mod, this level within the game. They say this is basically pushing the Halo engine to its limits, it can barely handle this. I imagine they couldn't have made a finished game this big, but we can see now that this is the ambition, and of course, you know, everyone's computer is strong enough now, and so you really think, this is the kind of, I'm more inclined to find this interesting because, to me, this is the future of Halo that we never got. Some people in the comments on Steam have been saying like, oh cool, it's like Halo Infinite, but in this kind of fun, old, quaint engine. I'm only a few seconds in, but already I kind of have to say I think this is cooler than Halo Infinite because again, just those kind of quirks of the old Halo engine, the physicality, the just responsiveness of everything in general is extremely satisfying to play around with. I never found Infinite that fun to just mess with like the original Halo for these reasons that I kind of have trouble articulating because I've got kind of my own language for what makes Halo interesting. To me, Halo, it's again just this kind of, look at all those hard impacts, the way things fly around and explode. Let me just show this off. I love those exaggerated, bouncy moon physics of everything. It's very much kind of, by being a bit unreal in the direction of, you know, exceptional impact, more gravity instead of less gravity, or realistic grounded gravity, just making more of an impact makes it feel a bit more real in that way, and I'm very much a fan of, again, just attention to details in a way that they don't err on the side of realism, they err on the side of everything feeling very visceral and interesting, lots of stuff going on. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm babbling, I'm just very excited and kind of playing and kind of talking at the same time. I just wanted to put something up as kind of a general contribution to YouTube while this thing is new, and for friends of mine as well who know how I think, it's something for them too. They can see me exploring this different thing, which is, I talk a lot in general about Halo, but Bungie as well interests me, and this is just going to expand that whole subject of exploring what was on the minds of the cool people making games 20 years ago. And yeah, I think that this is just, again, more interesting stuff that, oh geez. This is interesting for the line of exploration that I'm always going into, this sort of, what was cool and considered the future in around 2000, what was kind of their idea of the future of video games, and did we kind of lose out on a cool potential future because basically a different set of ideas than what was actually driving these games and making them unique won out. And that's sort of my reading of what happened to video games. The people who make the new Halo games, they basically, the trouble is that they don't think like old Bungie. Like Halo Infinite, you know, they called it Infinite and they sold it as like the big return to those old Halo levels, but it's not big like Halo was in a few very key ways. Like, something you'll notice here is I don't have a map for one, and there isn't really a strict separation between the different things that I'm doing, where everything that you do in Halo Infinite has a very specific goal, a very defined thing you're there for. You get your skill point, you check your activity off your mini-map or whatever, and you get a very specific reward for it, whereas a level being big in old Halo was more like the whole world is one big battle with no defined limits or, you know, lines. There are no real firm criteria by which you can define where one part of a level ends and another begins. Instead, it's all one big whole, in a way of, how do I explain that? When you basically... Halo Infinite has a few problems. I guess the one being that rather than being... I'm sorry, I'm having trouble articulating this again because I'm trying to think in lines which are not already explored. I think that that's how we actually get value out of talking about games. There's no sense in saying what's already been said. Trouble with trying to coin your own terminology, of course. You have to think originally from scratch, and how do I put it? Halo Infinite's problem is that it's one big space but made to be played in settings, and the idea is that there are no real lasting consequences from one thing to the next. It's all very self-contained. You engage with one part of it and then that is done, and it has no real meaningful bearing on the next thing that you do. In a way that's not true of this. Like, if I get hurt in one gunfight, I can't return to the hard reset point and put myself back to zero. I'm actually hurt, and you know, the guns that I get in one spot are the ones I'm going to be taking with me to the next. In that sense, every action becomes consequential because there's no real way to constantly be re-zeroing myself like there is constantly in Infinite with the outposts, and that's more generally the design of first-person shooters which are open world. I hate that terminology. From, you know, Far Cry 3 onwards, what's really going on in those games is they're shooters like Halo, but each level is absolutely tiny, and because they're tiny, the stakes are tiny, you could say every time you hit a checkpoint in a game like Halo, that is also kind of set.
Sit down, bitch!
That was a bit meaner a line from that Marine, sit down, bitch, and he was firing his gun a bit more aggressively there, I noticed as well. You can just see some certain details which are obviously very deliberate in the finished game, like the rate at which Marines fire, they weren't worked out by this point. I just thought that was very interesting, the aggression of that Marine in a few points. I also think the gun sounds a bit meaner, if you understand what I mean. The lines in general, the tone is a bit heavier, a bit more.
They won't mess with us
Again, there's obviously James Cameron's Aliens DNA all over this game, but it feels much more like that kind of more violent, more visceral, darker movie tone here is what I'm picking up. Kind of something which obviously changed as we were going. But yes, then, what's interesting about Halo is that when you have one continuous open level, consequences carry on for a long time, like a longer level, like Assault on the Control Room takes you 45 minutes or something, then everything that happens in that time is going to be having serious consequences until you hit that next level and hit your reset point, you lose health, and you need to look within that level to get more. Whereas Halo Infinite is something which constantly resets you. Far Cry 3 constantly resets you. All of those games, they claim to be hardcore, but they're not, you know, it's basically instance mini-game kind of experience. I'm being chased by an elite with a sword, that's pretty funny. Sorry, I'm probably doing something a bit too much to talk over. I'm comfortable talking over Halo Combat Evolved because I've played it to death 100 times, I don't have to think. This isn't difficult, but it's very stimulating, I'll say. Okay, it may have just gotten difficult. Let's see if I can get those guys in. Very good. I'm sorry if this isn't the most interesting thing, but I'm having a very fun time just seeing Bungie's chaotic sense at work, this idea of just making this massive open battlefield that's all doing its own thing all at once. So it's something I should have brought up before. Do you see, if you've played the game or if you've watched it on my channel, do you see how much more this resembles Myth than even the most big, open and chaotic parts of Halo Combat Evolved, where you can really see the Myth engine DNA in this, where our ground is very jagged, very one-to-one, solid, looks like you could touch it. Very entertaining to me, that detail. It's hard to explain, but I just love how physical this is, and you can see that at one point the ambition was much more obviously, okay, we're going to make Myth, and it's going to be Myth with guns, and this is like Myth in a few ways. Myth has that kind of thing I was just saying about Halo, where each level there's no real reset opportunity, which imbues every possible action with extreme gravity and consequence. This idea that, you know, the consequences are going to stay with you until you hit the next completely self-contained instance of gameplay, or whatever we want to call it. This is a neat looking sniper, very utilitarian, weird bug gun there. Anyway, let's get back in this rocket thing, which is very cool. But yeah, it's very much like a Myth level detail, where you just kind of go to a space and it's all open, there's enemies scattered around, you go to a place, there's more resources, you keep going. The objective is somewhere over the horizon, you and a bunch of stuff between you and what you're meant to be doing. A whole bunch of chaotic possibility, and the whole appeal of the game is just the amount of crazy stuff that can happen as you're working your way over there. And yeah, again, I think there was kind of a massive lost opportunity in not turning Halo into Myth. I think that the direction for the sequels was definitely... When I heard Halo 2 was coming out as a kid, my dream was that it would basically look like this. It would be massive, it would be open. You would see horizon to horizon, there would be 100 Marines fighting 100 aliens. You can see aliens on the horizon, go pick a fight with them, vehicles going off exploding, and just... it would feel big in this sense of everything is very immediate, very responsive, and very reactive. It's more like an entire world. Halo 2 went bigger on conceptual scale, but in terms of practical moving parts you get to play with, I would say it's a scaled down game. I can explain that in a few ways, like kind of the default Marine loadout in Halo 1, Combat Evolved, whatever you call it, is 5. And then in Halo 2, it's 2 or 3. I found that very disappointing. It's something we can very readily quantify. You have Everyone looks a bit nicer, they're less jagged than the guys in this car with me, but at the same time, it's just, you know, Halo, the appeal to me wasn't, wow, look how many polygons are in their faces. It was, wow, like, look, we're in this massive open space and all these guys are doing their own little autonomous actions like they're alive. It's like a living little toy box world and everything is... That was entertaining. Okay, let's see if this guy can not kill us this time. Anyway, what was I saying? Yes. The appeal from, like, Halo 1 to me was that it was very big, very physical, very rules-based and chaotic, and my favorite levels were the ones where it's just you, a bunch of stuff in a big open space, and you can just blow yourself out of 100 times and get 100 different interesting results. And playing this level, I can definitely feel that Bungie thought, and of course I played Myth as well, Bungie clearly thought that was awesome, and they wanted to make this kind of very rule-abiding, very well-behaved physical space where you get all this interesting behavior. You've got this Jeep which bounces up and down over the terrain, rockets which physically fly through the air, bullets which are also tracked projectiles which bounce off of shields, and you know, just make these cool tracer effects as they fly through the air. Again, why it feels cool, this old school of game, these ones that were made up to, I would call Far Cry 1 kind of the swan song of this genre, or this era of game, is that, again, the physicality, the sense that, like, hard, trackable events are happening within your computer screen, more like a world is playing out in front of you. You fire up a Call of Duty campaign, you can't do anything like this inside it. They give you a car, you can feel that it's kind of this ghostly entity that has barely simulated physicality going for it compared to this car, which, you know, anything I can think of doing with it, I'll get a satisfying and coherent result, and I can take it anywhere, you know, the Call of Duty campaign alternative. I don't mean to pick on it, I don't dislike those, I think they're trying to do something very different, and for that thing they're trying to do, they do it pretty well, and it's pretty ambitious, but it's not the Halo thing, and again, just what we're doing here is something that games basically stopped trying to deliver, and because no one really went to the work of quantifying what made this interesting, we were able to lose it. People will tell you, oh, why are you so sore? First-person shooters still get made, but what if I like a game that feels like this lost level of Halo 1? What if I like Halo Combat Evolved in general? You can try to tell me that, you know, Halo Infinite is more of the same, and it kind of is. Credit to Halo 3, they got a bit of the appeal here and there, but, like, this is really a rather rare class of experience, and barely understood by the people who are meant to be the guardians of it at this point, by which I mean 343, of course. I don't mean to pick on them, but I have to say, like, they went and dug this up for us, which is very good, but at the same time, like, you guys are digging through old Bungie Halo 1 files and rebuilding the levels and sharing that with the fans and stuff. Don't you have new games to be making? I mean, Halo Infinite was okay, and I guess you were told to focus on multiplayer and turn that into the new Counter-Strike. Very bizarre line of thinking, but I get that you have bosses to answer to. Halo made a lot of money on that front, but maybe it's a bit concerning that 343 were able to deliver this as much as I enjoy it, and perhaps a touch concerned at the output and quality of work going on there. Again, I think that they... If I were to ask them what it is that makes Halo unique among these games, if I were to say what makes Halo different to Call of Duty, they'd probably struggle to give a real interesting answer. They would say Halo is about storytelling, it's about first-person shooting mechanics, it's about the lore and the Master Chief, and, you know, they'd say a bunch of incidental stuff, but I think it's, despite the popularity, very poorly understood, and again...
Pelican reinforcements, got your back, Chief! Coming in hot!
They got my back. I'm the Chief, even though I don't look like him down there, I guess.
Stand by for special delivery.
Sorry if you find my excessive talking annoying, but...
Go ahead and secure the control room, sir. We'll take care of rescue and recovery.
Did that say they're Spartans? Anyway, sorry if I'm being a bit annoying with my fondness for my own voice and my own ideas, but again, you know, I won't be the only one making videos on this. You can look at others, and, you know, as always, the value that comes from my video is the fact that it's from me. That's always my thinking on how you bring any value to YouTube. But anyway, what I was saying, you know, what's the obvious sign that what makes this cool is poorly understood, that nobody else is doing it anymore? because nobody quantifies it, but what we need, of course, is some clown on YouTube to say they're making a Halo Combat Evolved-like or a Halo-vania, and they make up terminology and they say, this is why it was good all along, and then we get a million indie games weirdly trying to cargo cult that made-up terminology and so on. I'm sorry, I'm just venting about things which annoy me now. I should be positive because this is an exciting time. Look, it's the flamethrower that Gearbox put in the PC port, and this strange thing, which I think is kind of in the Halo single-player version 3 mod, which I might show off another time, and here are other Spartans who look kind of like me as well. They're in this weird proto-chief mode of looking. And I guess that the idea at one point in the development of this game was that the Spartans would just be kind of your upgraded infantry, sort of like how the barbarians are the better version of your basic swordsmen in Myth. Let's watch these guys fight. They seem to be doing pretty good. They seem to have the exact same shield effect as the elites, and just, yeah, they behave like Marines, but seem to be a bit stronger, and just look at them go. And there's an indoor wraith who might be in trouble. Oh, there we go.
That can't be all of them.
Did that have a second elite as a passenger? I think a lot of this stuff was more complex back when, in the original incarnation of this game, of course, they kind of simplified in a way which is probably for the best. Everything that's in the... Uh-oh. It's old, funny-looking beta elites. Okay, that's not working. Anyway, so as I was saying, it seemed like a fair bit was cut and simplified from this build of the game, but, you know, on one hand the thing had to run on an Xbox, and on the other, you know, it just had to run in general and make coherent sense. The visuals, I'd say, are a lot more chaotic at this point, kind of less focused. I talk a lot about how I think there's a great deal of refinement and coherence to how everything looks in the final game. You can really read the finer points of what Halo is meant to be about through very subtle points of the visual design, which I think are a bit lost here in generic video game shapes, which will get ironed out. And also I'm just thinking, it's very chaotic in a way which I like, of course, but I get that they wanted their gunfights to probably, they wanted to err on the side of coherent rather than chaotic. I understand that, but you know, my favorite levels in Myth were always the ones where you just have a bunch of crazy stuff going on, frankly. The ones where rather than tactically finding the right thing to do, I could just set up a very cool movie battle and let it play out. And yeah, I like this level that Bungie have made here, but I like it not because of interesting tactical possibilities, even though I'm sure if I were to set it to Legendary and then try to beat it again, it would be a very interesting challenge. I'd have to think through, but yeah, I really like this just because it's loads of stuff happening all at once and I can just watch it all play out. It's like, again, it's that reason that I like Far Cry 1, which I consider a very close sibling of Halo, even though it's made on another continent. Sensibilities, I think, are closer to Halo 1 in Far Cry 1 than they are in Halo 2, I would almost say. It's, again, that fascination with open, wild spaces, you know, different autonomous things happening outside of the player's input, like the way that the humanity, the Flood, and the Covenant all fight in Halo 1. It's reminiscent of the mutants and the mercenaries in Far Cry 1, and don't let people on YouTube tell you otherwise. Far Cry 1 has, frankly, in my opinion, some of the greatest AI in the history of video games. Even that term AI is reductive. I don't know what it is, they just behave in a way which is very coherent. It's not very clearly signed or telegraphed, or the rules of it aren't too plain, but, you know, people get mad because they get caught while sneaking and aren't sure why, but that doesn't mean it's bad. If you just think in terms of, like, okay, does it kind of make sense why that happened? Everything is very coherent in how it behaves in Far Cry 1 in a way which I absolutely adore. Now, will this end the level? I'm not sure, but just, again, that last thought I want to get out if this does end the level is that what I see as the sensibilities of Halo Combat Evolved are very interestingly embodied in this level. Just the open space, the fascination with the possibility of just lots of chaotic, semi-autonomous parts, largely left to their own devices with the player as more of a directing force than a sole agent of action. And was there anything else I wanted to say? Again, just the physicality and everything of Halo, but that's something you can observe at any point. Okay, let's just do this and see what happens. So this looks an awful lot like the cartographer or the control room, a few different points in Halo you can see. It's just very fun to see these old forms of a lot of ideas. There's a funny old first-person shooter walk for the Master Chief there. Other Spartan friends telling us let's go. And apparently the people who ported this to the Master Chief collection wanted to put a funny anime girl on the Warthog. Well, that was very fun. I hope you enjoyed watching it and didn't mind me talking over the top of it that whole time. But yeah, you can really feel that Bungie were proud at this point. I think this was the thing they used to show it off at Macworld, that it was that long ago. Yeah, I think that might have said Bungie or Mac at one point in the original incarnation if you look this up on YouTube. Digsite are the team who dug this up, and again, I'm sorry if I sounded like I was trashing them out, but I am very grateful to 343 and Bungie for digging this up, and there we go, we've just crashed because the level ended. Well, I guess I'll call it here. Thank you very much.